How does a writing specialist use his skills to grow multiple SEO-focused businesses in today's online landscape?
I think it comes down to like what are you good at? Like what's your core competence? My main thing is writing an SEO newsletter. I guess what I'm really trying to do is find services or have products that my readers resonate with and can purchase.
We have a returning guest on the pod to share tips on how to grow a newsletter, age domains, partnerships, and more.
Definitely consistency is important. That's the hardest thing, is to just sit down each week and do the work. But I really think it stacks up. You write it a bunch and you're like, okay, like this sort of thing resonates with people. And this gets me a lot of responses. So like kind of double down on that. I definitely learned a lot, kind of what not to do. But overall, I'm happy with the purchase. I think that's a decent way to grow a newsletter.
Welcome to an exclusive interview on the Niche Pursuits podcast with Sean Markey, creator of the Rank Theory newsletter and a strong advocate for doubling down on your strengths. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, Spencer here, founder of Niche Pursuits. Are you adding a new internal link pointing to each article you publish? You should be. Ever find it time-consuming and a bit overwhelming? Remembering what content you publish and deciding which anchor text to use can be a real headache. What if there was a better way? Well, that's exactly why I created Link Whisper. Simply click Add Inbound Internal Links, and Link Whisper will scan your site in seconds and suggest the most relevant links with appropriate anchor text for your new article. Now simply check the box next to the internal links you want to add, and Link Whisper will add these links for you. No need to go into each article, edit, and add the link. It's already done. No more manual internal link building or guesswork. Just efficient, accurate linking that saves you time and improves your SEO. Transform your content strategy with Link Whisper. Start linking smarter, not harder. Use the coupon code PODCAST for $15 off. Head over to linkwhisper.com and use coupon code PODCAST to get $15 off.
All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we are joined by Sean Markey with ranktheory.com. Sean, welcome on board.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is, we have a repeat guest in the house. We were talking about beforehand. You were last on the podcast before I hosted, so probably, well, I guess that puts us at 3+ years ago, but welcome back. Your first episode is really, really great. We'll get that included in the show notes, but maybe catch us up to speed. We got a lot of new listeners since then, and certainly for people who did listen to that first show and want to just hear what's going on, maybe bring us up to speed on who you are and what you're involved with.
Yep. So I started doing SEO in like 2011, back when it was easy, and just tried a bunch of affiliate sites. Failed at that. Back in the exact match days, like I think one of my sites was helmetsforsale.net.
Oh gosh, I feel like Spencer had a couple of those exact match domains as well.
Yeah, that was definitely the thing at the time, to build those kind of sites. But yeah, I moved on from there and tried to do my own agency, which failed. And then I started working for Smash Digital. It wasn't called that at the time, but that's what they're called now. Travis Jameson, he's pretty well known in the community. Helped lead SEO there, and actually quit there in about 2018. And I went and worked for Siege Media for like 2 weeks. Not a good fit. Just not a good, corporate culture kind of guy, I guess. But I was kind of, the whole time messing around with affiliate sites, and that January of 2019, one of my sites in the CBD niche started to take off. And then in March, it really took off. And it was printing money. We were doing like $1,500 to $2,500 a day in CBD affiliate.
Wow.
It was a wild couple of months. I was ranking. This was back when you could rank first for, the main keyword as a featured snippet, and also the first organic result. So
double dipping.
The good old days. someone approached me and I sold that site. And then I just kind of kept rolling in the cannabis niche. I was doing like how to grow cannabis type keyword affiliate stuff, doing really well until the 2020 December update when I got crushed. I lost like 99% of my traffic. Um, and I still had a couple of sites going on, but that was the main one. And I kind of moved away from affiliate sites at that point and kind of wound them down. My big area of expertise is age domains. All of these sites, except for one, were built on age domains, and just use that to really scale up, affiliate sites that rank. It was making a good income.
Let me, I guess, ask you from the outset, because you're involved in so many things now that we'll go into. I think this is going to be such a fun episode for everybody listening because there's going to be something for everyone. And you talked a lot about age domains on your last interview. And what are you seeing as age domains role nowadays for whether we're talking about starting a new site or something else, something different with the role of age domains with website building nowadays?
Yeah, I think they work really great still, and you can see that reflected in the price. It's not easy to pick up a nice age domain for cheap. Back in the 2019, 2020 period, you could get a solid DR50 plus with a bunch of niche relevant referring domains for like low thousands maybe, and now that's like a $20,000 name all day. So it's I mean, it's hard to pick them up because they work so well. That's why they're so competitive. And yeah, it's a great way to start if you have some upfront capital. And I think there are some things that are different. I don't know if you want to, really go into that about how I would deal with age domains these days. Maybe that's something we could get to, but they definitely still work.
Yeah, maybe let's come back to it. I've got a note on it, and maybe let's come back to it. Maybe tell us where you're at right now. You kind of teased it a bit about how you've moved away from a couple of things. What's going on right now at recording early 2024?
Yep. My main thing is writing an SEO newsletter. It's called Rank Theory. I, do some sponsorships here or there. It's not a big part of my income. I really love writing it. People seem to love it. And I guess what I'm really trying to do is find services or have products that, my readers resonate with and can purchase, more so than building out a lot of, like having a huge portfolio of sites or something. So, we do some agency related stuff, specifically around strategy consultations. And yeah, that's my main income source at the moment. Like writing the domain, trying to get a newsletter, trying to get some agency clients.
So let's talk about newsletters. They're certainly talked about a lot. I think a lot of people that have heard that will be in a space where a newsletter feels like a good bolt on, right? Like when you first hear about it, you're like, oh, I have a website. Should I bolt a newsletter on? Or I have a business, like a local business, or I have an agency. Should I bolt a newsletter onto that? You're doing it as the primary driver of what you're focusing on. Like, talk about the differences in using it as a bolt-on and why you're doing it as a primary driver of where you spend your time and energy.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like what are you good at? Like what's your core competency? And for me, it's writing, which is, kind of unfortunate since the whole internet seems to be swinging toward video. I'm not great on video. I'm not great on the spot. But I'm a really good writer. And so it just makes sense to me to, invest a lot in that. And then you can say, okay, you have your own newsletter, like, you own that list. It's been said 100,000 times. Like you own your newsletter. You don't own your Twitter audience, your Facebook audience. So like all that adds up, in my opinion, to be like newsletter is a valuable place for me to say what I think or what I care about, and have an audience that engages. And then, if you have a niche site or you have a brand or whatever, you maybe aren't putting all of your energy into a newsletter because you're trying to rank for these keywords and you're trying to, make your TikToks on point or whatever. So I think it just comes down to what's the thing that you're going to focus on. Where are you good?
I think I have not heard that brought up. I think you bring up a really good point that writing is core to website building, creating content that people resonate with, that connects with people. And you're right. A lot of what's happened with the SERPs with Google over the last couple of years has tended to drive a lot of writers away thinking like, oh man, what do I do with my time and energy? And a lot of the encouragement is you need to be on video. And a lot of people are saying, I don't want to be on video. I want to be writing. I want to be on the other side of the screen. So I think that's a really compelling point. So I hope people kind of heard that. Now, I guess why the shift to writing a newsletter and some of your other projects from building affiliate websites? And I think from what you said, that started all the way back in like 2020 and beyond. So this isn't a recent adjustment you've made, but again, a lot of people listening might be having the same questions and the same thoughts about shifting where they're focusing. Why did you shift your focus and how did that develop over time?
Yeah, so I started writing about domains in 2019. And as far as I know, not a lot of other people were writing about that. Like that came later. Like I would say it wasn't like super mainstream at that point. And I just sort of started doing it for fun because I'm just kind of a nerd about domains. Like that's how I got into domains. I just like domains and I can't stop buying them. And then so I started building on them and it was like, oh, this is a whole thing. So yeah, I started in 2019 just writing about domains. There wasn't a lot out there. I partnered for a minute with Andrew Rosner, who is the owner of Media Options. He's a great domain broker. They're the best domain brokers. So that really helped me kind of, I don't know, I guess legitimize the newsletter writing for a bit. It was like a paid product for a while, but it just wasn't the right thing to be focusing on, I guess, for him. So we kind of parted ways. It, was friendly. Nothing was no drama there. And then I just kept writing. I have swung between charging for the newsletter and not a bunch, and I settled on not charging for it because I'd rather have more readers than limit that. I mean, when I write a newsletter, it's like maybe 5-6 hours of writing work. Like I don't want that to be behind a paywall that only a small number of people read because I don't have a huge SEO influencer audience to really make that a no-brainer.
How have you grown the newsletter? How has that like ebbed and flowed? It sounds like you've gone back and forth on a lot of models that perhaps a lot of people would be thinking about. I mean, I know I have like a little small newsletter as well that I just started last year. And these are all, I feel like I get to ask you today, like all the questions I've had in my head for the last kind of 9 months or so as I've been building it, charge or don't charge. How do you get new readers? How do you find the ability to balance getting new readers up against writing content every week or every month, or how do you settle on a cadence? So anyways, these are all the questions I have. But let me start with, how have you grown the list? How have you focused on trying to grow the list? What's worked? What hasn't? Maybe any insights you can share?
Yeah. Like there's a lot to be said for being consistent. When I'm consistent, everything goes up. And when I take a couple months off, as I did in the past, I try not to do this anymore. It would go down. It would be harder to kind of get that momentum back. As for me, I think prior to Twitter changing hands, I grew a fair amount of subscribers on Twitter. I don't think I'm not the target writer on Twitter these days to have it really to grow and to get out there. I think a lot of like, I don't know, engagement baiting or something is the way a lot of people really, talk about their SEO heist and get a lot of attention. And that's, I'm a lot quieter. So I used to grow it a fair amount on Twitter. I'm kind of looking for what the main growth channel is these days, but in the past that's worked. Word of mouth has been pretty solid because I think you've read a few of my newsletters. They're kind of weird and they're kind of
Quirky.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quirky, and yeah.
So people tend to kind of share that. Um, I guess that and podcasts like this, people discovering me because I'm not, like I don't put myself out there a lot. So that's mostly how it's grown.
You mentioned as we were preparing for the interview that you had actually bought a newsletter. And I mean, there's a market for everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a market for newsletters, especially with, some of the big newsletters selling of late, over the past couple of years and stuff. I don't know. Can you tell us more about that story?
Yeah. I just, I think I was reading, I think it's called Deuce, DUUCE.com. They had a
Mm-hmm.
newsletter and they're like, hey, there's a SEO newsletter for sale. This was last May, I think.
Okay.
So at the time, I hadn't been taking it super seriously, writing a newsletter, just kind of searching for what to do next. It was like an on again, off again thing. And I was like, all right, I need to get back into this. I'm going to make a commitment. And in April of last year, I said I'm going to do 2 months of daily newsletters on the Substack that I owned. So I did that. It went pretty well. And I was like, all right, I'm ready to really get involved. And so I saw that listing. I checked it out on acquire.com, and it was the weekly SEO.com.
Oh,
I
okay.
think a lot of people might have heard of it. It was just it started during COVID, and it was like each week it's like, here's the best article of the week and a couple other interesting things, and that was it. And I was like, I've got a little cash, I might try and acquire this and integrate it into my newsletter. And the per subscriber rate was pretty solid. I think I acquired it for like $3 per subscriber,
Mm-hmm.
which seemed, at least at that time, to be like the industry standard for like trying to pick up new subscribers via ads or whatever. So yeah, I purchased that and I integrated it with my newsletter like that June, and I definitely learned a lot, kind of what not to do. But overall, I'm happy with the purchase. I think that's a decent way to grow a newsletter.
It's funny because I mean, a lot of people will start a website, right, and then use an age domain and maybe merge that to their website, or 301 redirect some of that to their website. I'm sure there's some differences, but it sounds a little bit similar when you buy and acquire a newsletter and then kind of merge it in with your newsletter and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of things to consider. Like, it just feels really fraught. Like, all these people, like, they didn't sign up to hear from me and my dumb, antics. Like, how am I going to convince them to stick around? And yeah, there's definitely a learning curve there.
A lot of people will grow a newsletter with like a freebie, downloadable, like something that I'll give you this in exchange for your email address, and hopefully then I can kind of win you over with like an autoresponder sequence of my best content. I mean, this is not the only way to do it, but this is another way to get new people. Have you played around with that at all? Have you tried that? Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I probably should. Like one of the kind of like reoccurring storylines of my journey is I don't do the best practices all the time. Probably for the worse, but like, it makes what I end up working on kind of unique. But no, I've never done that. I probably should. Um, I think like that it makes sense to do that and then like run ads against it and be like, oh, here's the thing you want. I made it, and come consume it and then stick around. But I haven't done that yet. Maybe
Well,
I'll
I mean,
take a stab at
the
it.
flip to it would be that a lot of people will say that you don't get necessarily as high of a like an engaged list or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
like you said, so everything's worth trying, but not everything is worth sticking to.
For
um,
sure.
have you stayed focused on age domains with the newsletter? Because that was the original reason and the original kind of cadence with the content, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that something you broadened out on and kind of gone more broad SEO, or even outside of SEO, or have you stuck within that lane?
Yeah, I started like, here's the 10 domains I would buy this week at auction. That's kind of how the newsletter started. Here's what I would do with it. Here's why it's valuable. Here's the links it has, blah, blah, blah. And then that became like, not everybody, but a lot of people were doing that. Like, here's the best domains. And then Otis came on the scene and everybody is promoting Otis, so I moved away from that. My writing style is sort of, I don't know, kind of sarcastic, kind of like everyone's in on the joke, and you know, I don't know. So that is to say, I moved away from really like, here's how to do SEO, here's how to do this thing, blah blah blah, and now it's like taking a couple of stories that are in the news and like writing my reaction to them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is why it's important, this is why it's stupid, this is what you can learn from it, this is what you should ignore, kind of my take on it. So it's almost like a, I don't know, like analyzing or ranting against the SEO headlines.
I just want to pull any insights you have from like your newsletter journey, which has really gone 3-4 years if you look at it now. What are just some of the top things you've learned from the different parts of the newsletter over the last 3 or 4 years? And again, I'm thinking about somebody who is really thinking about making a go of a newsletter in this calendar year. Someone who's trying to learn from you about some of the ups and the downs you've had. Just maybe any insights you can give to those people that are thinking about a newsletter and trying to maybe skip some of the mistakes that are out there, or try to get to the things that really help influence its growth.
Mm-hmm. Definitely consistency is important. That's the hardest thing, is to just sit down each week and do the work. But I really think it stacks up and becomes exponential over time. The other thing I would say is like, learn all the best practices so that you know what to break or how you're breaking it and how you're being unique by doing that. A lot of people, like you're saying, like, oh, have an offer and convince people and have a welcome list and all this stuff. It's like, I know I'm not doing that, and I'm doing this other thing, and maybe it doesn't help me grow as much, but like, as soon as you get the welcome email from me, it's weird, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. It just stands out.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I mean, this is my opinion, and I guess I'm pretty biased, but like, I see a lot of people maybe looking down the barrel of AI newsletters written by AI. There's so many newsletters out there. Like, why would anyone read your AI summaries of the news? You know what I mean? Like, I just, like, if you think about it from the point of view of someone that has, they get 10 newsletters a week or 15 a day or whatever number, like why would they read yours? I think you have to be able to answer that. Maybe not at first, like, I didn't come out the gate like, oh, this is the best thing, it's super unique and everyone's gonna love it. But like, you write it a bunch and you're like, okay, like, this sort of thing resonates with people and this gets me a lot of responses. So like, I'll kind of double down on that. And so, I mean, like anything, you do it a bunch and then you kind of find your way. And, your early work, you look back in a couple of years, you're like, ugh, like, that's ass. I'm glad I'm not writing that anymore. So, you can see yourself improving.
I feel the same way. We recently moved my little email list from MailerLite over to ConvertKit, and so we had to like look through a lot of the old emails to figure out the formatting and all that. And I was like, oh boy, it's only been 9 months, and I've already feel like my first emails were garbage. But anyways, I digress. Let's, if we can, like, I want to make sure to get a little bit of your thoughts on age domains, and so I do want to transition just a bit to hear about that. I mean, if you, shameless plug, but if you haven't listened to Sean's first interview, it really is like an A to Z on age domains, and I feel like a lot of it still applies. I didn't listen to it, but I reread the recap email page on the Niche Pursuits podcast about it in preparation, and I feel like it's still a really good A to Z on how to use age domains to start and build and potentially flip websites, how to merge them together, all that sort of stuff. I mean, what's changed about age domains over the last couple of years, if anything? And maybe let's use that as a springboard into talking about age domains this year and beyond.
This is mostly anecdotal, like just from observing things. But the way, like, the biggest change that I'm doing myself is, I think the days of doing a bunch of redirect chains are coming to an end or have ended. I've messed around with it a bit, and I haven't seen any real success doing that. I've seen other sites talk about how they aren't having success with it. It used to be like, you have a domain, you build it out for 3 months, then you redirect it to your main site, or that becomes your main site, and then you buy another age domain to redirect to that. You kind of stack up these referring domains. But I think there's a certain kind of signal that can produce, and it wasn't something that was picked up on at first, but I think these days it can be. Like, if a site like Forbes or something, a DR 1 million, can have a bunch of redirects coming in, whatever. But like, if your DR 10 site with like 40 pieces of content has 3 domains being redirected, like, that doesn't make sense in like a real world use case. So for me, like, my advice would be buy an age domain or an expiring domain that's already a good brand. And that's going to be expensive, because good domains go for thousands of dollars, even with no SEO, authority to speak of. So finding one you can really build a brand on that has also like a bunch of niche relevant authority, that's expensive. Like, that's really expensive. So it's a lot harder to have some success there if you're just starting.
So if I were paraphrasing, age domains for new projects, still seeing a lot of success, and we can talk more about it, but age domains to redirect to a current project, to a current site, outside of super high DR sites that are already kicking on their own, you're not seeing it work quite as well now.
Right. Yep. You said you're moving away from affiliate sites with age domains just because of the expense, right? Just because it used to cost $2,000 to buy an age domain that was awesome, and now it's 20, 30, 40,000. And I've seen you share some of the like crazy auctions on GoDaddy. Like, you're sharing some that are over 6 figures. And I mean, I agree with you. Like, even 3 or 4 years ago, that would just be insane. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the tenants are still working. If you do have the budget to say you're going to invest in a new website, you're going to build a new website, and you want to earmark $20,000 or $30,000, or even maybe a little less if you can find a good deal. Like, are all the basic tenants still working the same way in terms of how you build it? Yeah, I would say so. I think the main thing that's changed, and one thing that's kind of turned me off of affiliate is, I mean, just the way the SERPs have gone. If you look at who's ranking for affiliate type keywords, it's not affiliate sites. Increasingly, that's true. Like, there's some exceptions here or there, but like these huge media sites that really started in late 2020 that I saw. All these magazines and news companies sites ranking for like best testosterone, best CBD, like all these really historically valuable affiliate keywords. And that's just gotten, I think, worse and worse from an SEO's point of view, or an affiliate marketer's point of view. And now, like, me personally, I wouldn't start a new project that is planning on being an affiliate site or an ad revenue focused site, because every update, it seems like those sites lose, and sites that do something, sell something, provide some service, are a brand, are the sites that are winning. And I think you can still take an H domain and like really kickstart your project by like having something to offer and building it on an H domain. And of course, there's 1,000 exceptions, but that's the general way the tide is moving.
I wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
In this video, I will show you how we landed a placement on BBC and dozens of links in massive regional online publications such as Where's Online, Daily Post, and many more. This PR campaign was about the easiest place to pass your driving test for the first time in the UK. This is how we've done it. We simply went to the DVLA website, found the latest car driving test data by test center, and downloaded the data in a CSV format. Once we had the data, all we had to do is to look at the number of total tests per test center, then look at the number of first time passes to calculate the percentage of people who passed their test for the first time. Once we had the percentage numbers, we created a press release with our findings. Then we went to Roxhill and found journalists who talk about driving tests, and also looked for journalists who write in regional publications in the UK. In total, we have found about 1,800 journalists and sent them our press release by email. Within less than a day, our story got picked up by BBC, Cornwall Live, Wales Online, and dozens of other publications in the UK, providing our client a tsunami of backlinks perfectly relevant to the audience of the client, who is a specialist in learner driver car insurance. I hope this video is helpful and it shows you how you can also build links with freely available data from official sources.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now. I'm going to throw a kind of random question at you. You might have heard it already, but it's something that's been in the back of my mind, and I've seen chatter about it a bit. Certainly with 2023 behind us and a lot of the landscape shifting types of updates and SERP movements that we saw that you kind of just referenced, like helpful content update, continuous core updates, product review, or now review updates that are now just baked into the algorithm, and all this stuff changing. Like, a lot of people listening are going to have sites that are no content sites and affiliate sites that are no longer where they used to be, right? And a lot of the talk has been about, what do I do with them? What do you think of an idea that I've seen tossed around a bunch, which is buy an age domain, reboot it and take your content and move it over to a fresh age domain and try to rebuild it a little bit more with the content in place, but with a little bit more of an aim to be a business and to be offering something, but taking that content and using it somewhere different. Again, I'm not recommending this, and I'm just asking you as someone in the age domain space, like, is there validity to that concept, do you think, or is that not worth the effort?
I think it's worth it if your site that you had is just at zero. Like, there's nothing left, because at that point you have nothing to lose. If my site was working, if it was just outside the top 10 or something for the main keywords, I don't know that you would really get a lot out of moving it to an age domain, kind of like restarting, versus fixing whatever the reason is that your site's not ranking. And maybe it's something you can't fix, like you're just competing in a space where the top 10 is always going to be like these medical authorities or something, and like, that sucks. Like, I don't know, how do you fix that except for by becoming a medical authority and investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into content and links and whatever. But I have heard people that have had a site penalized. They move the content to an age domain that they have or another project they have, but they don't redirect things one-to-one, which was traditionally the advice, and all of their rankings come back on this new domain. It's something that Jackie Chow has talked about a lot, which is super interesting. I've not done it personally, but I've heard, secondhand. Yeah,
I guess that gets at the kind of like the idea you talk about, like, is it the content that's causing you not to rank and the content quality, in which case oftentimes moving it to an age domain probably wouldn't do much? Is it that the SERPs are going to be prohibitive from you ever ranking, in which case it doesn't matter what you do with your content. It doesn't matter if it's, Shakespeare, it's not going to rank because you don't have a DR90 in the medical space? Or could it be a domain level type of penalization, which does exist, right? And then maybe getting it off that domain could reboot that content. So interesting. Hey, you mentioned Jackie Chow. You have a partnership or community with him, don't you?
Yep, it's the Advise community. We
okay.
really kicked it off last July. We've been working on it together.
Can we talk about community? We've had a couple people on the last year that talk about how they think community is the next big thing. I hate saying the next big thing, by the way. It makes me sound like a newscaster. But as we talk about other areas to put our time and effort, if you're not wanting to spend your traditional maybe time on a side hustle like an affiliate site, I remember Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income is really bullish on his efforts in building community and stuff. So, what was the genesis of you and Jackie starting a community together?
I've kind of known him for several years. interacted on Facebook groups where, buying, selling sites. He's got a lot of stuff going on. So he would pop up when I was looking to buy or sell something. But we never really made anything happen. And I don't remember exactly how we started talking about this. I think he saw that I was tweeting about starting my own community,
Mm-hmm.
around rank theory, around my email newsletter. And I just hadn't pulled the trigger, but it's something I was investing a lot of time into learning about. I signed up for Jay Klaus's creator science. He's got some courses on community, and he's got a private community that I'm in as well. And I think he just DM'd me. He's like, "Hey, I have this, existing community. Do you want to go in on it together?" And at the time, so this was maybe like Mayish of last year. I was like, not really. I'm gonna do my own thing. And then I just never did it. Never pulled the trigger. So in July, I was like, all right, well, let's talk about this more. Let's do it. So we chatted, and it's just basically a 50-50 partnership. It's something that he created, but never really put a lot into. So I think it was doing like 300-ish a month at that time when I took over. And he basically said, you handle all the administrative things, and, like making sure, like, if there's a billing error, like, you talk to the person, figure it out, and all that kind of stuff. And he said, I'll just, promote it in my newsletter and YouTube or whatever. And so that's kind of the split. And it's grown really well since then. It's done really well.
What, again, trying to get in the mindset of somebody listening who is a writer or somebody who, produces content and is trying to understand the differences between writing content for a website, creating content for a newsletter, and running a membership, running a community. I guess that's the best way to put it. What are the differences in how you have to manage something like that? And I guess I ask because in many ways, does having a community mean you have to create content for it, or is it very different from a newsletter and a website where you're less content creator, more curator of people's topics and people's thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it depends on, what you've got going on. I don't know if you're familiar with Traffic Think Tank. They are an SEO community, and I've been a member since they started. They went really heavy into education. So they have this whole library of educational content. So it's a compelling reason to join. The main, like, value prop there is, like, hey, there's a community, there's a lot going on, but we have this whole library of all this diverse content you can learn from. So, like, that's one direction. Like, that's not the direction we've gone. Ours is purely a Slack community where we just interact all day. It's definitely, a different vibe from running an affiliate site or publishing a newsletter. But as to what, like, it just depends on what you want the vibe to be. And so, because I'm working with Jackie, he's very transparent. He's very, he does a great job of saying, like, this is what I believe in. This is what people believe in traditionally, and they're wrong. And they're, the enemy, in quotes. Like, my philosophy is against theirs, and so people that really resonates with are interested in joining and talking about that. And so that's what you have to think about. Like, if you're setting up a community, like, what's your philosophy? What's your theory? What are you bringing to these people? That's, kind of, in conflict with what other people think. That's one way to frame it, I guess.
Yep. No, I get it. Yeah. You have to have a reason for people to be there, maybe. And if you aren't doing a lot of educational style content, like you talked about with the other community, perhaps having a different take on things, and people are intrigued to come to that community daily to get those fresh takes, like, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's like, the stuff that we're sharing there is very, I'd say it's like what's actually working now. Like, the whole,
Yeah.
like as soon as Reddit started ranking for everything, everybody was like, let's talk about this. How do we take advantage of that to rank stuff? How does this become a part of our strategy? What are we testing? Which
Yep.
is not, quite the vibe on like Traffic Think Tank, which is now owned by SEMrush. That's more maybe white hat enterprise focused, and there's room
Got
for
it.
both.
Partnerships come up sometimes, and that's a partnership you have. Uh, like, how do people think about partnerships as we move forward? Is that a good opportunity for people? I mean, it sounds like something you were kind of on the fence about, but goes really well for you. What things have you learned from a partnership that can help people evaluate perhaps partnering up with someone going forward with a project or a venture to take on?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important that hasn't worked out for me, but is important to recognize, is partnering with somebody who is very similar to you in work ethic. I think I'm the kind of person that just I want to do things like let's do it. Let's not plan for 3 months and have this whole thing. Like let's just go and we'll figure it out as we go. And not everybody is like that. Like that drives some people nuts. You know what I mean? So like, don't partner with that kind of person. If you're not that kind of person, you'll constantly be in conflict. I think that's a super important one. And Jackie's definitely someone that I think is similar to me. It's just like, let's go, let's do the thing.
Wow, you have a lot that you've been diving into. Maybe like how we've talked about age domains in terms of where you used to use them, how you use them now, how you see them now. We've talked about your newsletter and how you're focusing to grow that. We've talked about the community aspect and how you're partnering with Jackie. Like, do you have any other things that take up your time or you're looking at doing this year in terms of business opportunity?
Yeah. Speaking of partnerships, have partnered with somebody to build out a really like 10 out of 10 top tier domain name in a pretty lucrative space. I don't want to say what the brand is at this point because we're just getting started, but it's for sure $1 million domain name. And I just, they reached out to me because I am known in the domain investor space as someone who has SEO skills. And, they were like, hey, I just acquired this domain. I want to see if it makes sense to partner up. And we talked about it and went back and forth. And we're doing basically a 50-50 split. Like, this guy brought the domain to the table. I'm bringing the SEO and the content, and we're just gonna, go forward and build it out and see what happens. So that's go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask. I didn't mean to cut you off. Is that like what style of website is it? Is it like a content site or is it a business that is being launched on this age domain?
Yes. So the obvious thing to do is so this domain used to be a business. The domain by itself is really valuable, but it also has a ton of authority. Like it's almost DR70, has a bunch of
Wow.
really strong, real backlinks, and it ranks for the main keyword, with an empty website, which is amazing. It gets about 2,000 to 5,000 traffic a day just on a dead website right now, depending on what Google's ranking. So like that in itself is valuable. So I was just like, man, like put up an affiliate offer, like just cash in. But I already said like that's not the way to go. I think it's a way we could go because the domain and the brand is so strong. But what I'm trying to do is find somebody who already has this kind of product that we can white label, put it on top
Mm-hmm.
of the domain, because now we're a brand that sells a product, which, as I've stated, I think is a much stronger position to be in than just a pure affiliate. We could definitely go in that direction, but I'm holding out for trying to be a product and trying to integrate with someone else because I don't know the first thing about I'm not an expert in the space, but I can get the content done. I can get the links all built out and going where they need to. So that's a big project. I think that's going to take a lot of time this year that I'm super excited about.
Yes, that's the word I was going to use. How exciting. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so that came about just, publishing stuff for 4 years, just kind of built a reputation for myself.
well, and that's the hidden value of, say, a newsletter that perhaps is hard to put a dollar price on. Like we talked about how to get new subscribers, and we didn't really get into monetization, but you kind of mentioned like, hey, I'm trying to partner up my readers with good opportunities that I see in the space and stuff. But the secondary benefits and the tertiary benefits that come from having a newsletter, and even potentially other opportunities that come along that already have or will come along in the future that don't even get mentioned to the newsletter, but you get an introduction from someone who was on your newsletter, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard to put that in value, but it's also important for people to take into consideration when they invest in projects like that.
Yep. Yeah. It's one of those things, like you said, you can't really assign a value to it or be like, oh, this happened because of this. It's just like, I published stuff. I hit publish for the last 4 or 5 years, and now it's starting to pay dividends.
Yeah. I've told Spencer like off air when we chatted about it, like I've been hosting this podcast for a couple of years now, and we don't really ever talk about my marketing agency, but I definitely get the occasional person who's like, oh yeah, well, I've listened to you here or there on the podcast, and I follow you on Twitter, but really what I'm looking at is your expertise in this SEO question, but you just never know which dot connected first and how many dots it took to connect and all that. So anyways, just piggybacking on what you're doing. How do you spend your time, and how do you set your kind of, I don't want to get too tactical on like time structuring and stuff, but I'm just trying to understand, like, you have a lot going on and they're in a lot of different spaces, right? Like a newsletter is very different than creating a website on an age domain in a partnership, which is very different from running a community, which is and so how do you kind of plan out your week or your time, or how do you think these things through to kind of get these different things accomplished?
Yeah, I'm the wrong person to be giving good advice here, because mostly how I do things is just reacting to whatever the loudest, most pressing matter is. Historically, the whole, ADHD, which I totally have, thing. But it's something I've been working on for years to get better at. And I think just that slow work has paid off a little bit, and allows me to be able to plan and to like switch gears, get everything done. I also recently hired an executive assistant, which helps a lot. So getting to a place where I can afford that has been super helpful. But really, like, the other side of that is just being able to build a good team, and being able to know what you're good at and what you're terrible at. I'm terrible at like really, I don't want to say like the administrative side of things, but like remembering to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of examples, but just like being the responsible person. I'm historically not great at that. I'm much better at like dreaming up, oh, let's do this thing. Let's like, being creative and building new products or new businesses. So yeah, I spend my time probably badly. There's probably, like an engine that consumes a lot of gas, but doesn't go very fast. I think historically has been my productivity style. But it's something I'm getting better on, because like, if you're doing this many projects, you have to. I haven't talked about my publishing company, but I also started one of those, and it's just, you gotta get your organization together to be able to do all this, or you won't be doing all of this. So
right. Well, I think you're doing all right. I mean, if you talked about all the different things you have, and we didn't talk about a lot of, I know, because you've shared them publicly. So just been, someone in your community for quite a while now, like you've had a lot of big exits over the years, you've had a lot of website exits, and you've sold little projects like companies and stuff like that. So clearly, even though you say an engine that consumes a lot of gas, there's output at the end of it, and I think everyone kind of has their strategy. And I think that's kind of the important thing. Like, everyone has to decide what sort of shiny objects to lean into in terms of that's worth my time, and I'm going to make a go at it, because I don't know how how much it could be an influence versus saying no to something and saying like, that's still a good idea, but for whatever reason right now, I have to say no to that. I think that's one of the toughest things that all of us have to go through is what to say yes to, what to say no to, having multiple projects and the value of having some diversity and having our different irons in the fire versus being spread too thin and then being, good for nothing really.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I strongly agree with that.
In that vein, let me ask you, is there anything that you would love to get into right now because, the idea is super engaging or attractive or something, but you're saying no to this year?
Nothing comes to mind, mostly because I usually say yes and then it fails and then I'm off of that. I'm really trying hard to stay focused this year. I think there's like how that ends up coming out if I'm really staying focused is like, okay, I've got this publishing company. We're going to release 4 books a year. And it's like, oh, what if we release like 3 novelettes, shorter, like, oh, what about this idea? So within the idea, there's still a lot of, undisciplined focus, but at least I'm keeping it in the right bucket, which took a lot of effort to get to that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Well, you do have a newsletter where people can follow along with you. Can you share a little bit more about, we'll include in the show notes. I know it's the website's ranktheory.com, but share more about like just what people can expect if they join the newsletter. You've kind of gone through a lot of that, but like what who would be best for, the type of person that would be best to sign up and get it, and any more details.
Yeah. I pulled the audience and it's a lot of like just site builders, entrepreneurs. I think it's a solid read for them, but anyone really involved in SEO, especially if you're like kind of obsessed with SEO, there's a lot of nuances that you might get compared to someone who's not an expert in the space. It's mostly, this is something I've been grappling with. Like at this point, it's mostly entertainment with a side of education.
It's good.
I read a lot of SEO newsletters and they're mostly education,
right?
Maybe sometimes with some, seasoning of entertainment, but that's not the main point. And whenever I get in my head about that, like, I'm not really teaching anyone anything. I think I am though. Through education, it just, tastes good going down. You know what I mean? It's fun to consume, but you still learn something. So I've worked to let go of having any kind of, it's like, I'm sitting down, this is what I'm writing about, whatever it is what it is. And those emails do really well. And when I'm like, I need to like talk about this technique or whatever and kind of force it in there, those, like, I get no replies. No one really clicks on anything. So it's a nice feedback loop to just pay attention to, like, okay, this is what people like.
Well, we'll include that link in the show notes. And again, I'll encourage everyone to go back and listen to the first one if you want more on age domains and just that whole strategy. Because like I said, it still rings so true, today. Many of the, not that SEO changes that much really in the reality of it. Like a lot of it's content links, good technical, a lot of that stuff, right? And all those remain true, but some of the tactics can change a lot. But certainly, if you're listening, want a good A to Z on age domains, it's a great listen. Sean, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been great to have you a second time. We'll have to keep in touch on having you on sometime in the future. I'm sure you'll have 10 more projects we can hear about next time we talk to you.
I hope not. Stay focused.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It was great to chat.
Yeah, super good to have you. And until we talk next time, thanks again.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Just a final reminder that it was brought to you by Search Intelligence. And if you're looking for link building PR campaigns for your website, just head over to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them today. Cheers.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Niche Pursuits podcast. I just wanted to remind you that if you are ready to start building smarter, faster, and easier internal links, you should check out Link Whisper. You can get $15 off Link Whisper when you use the coupon code PODCAST at checkout. Head over to linkwhisper.com and use the code podcast in order to save $15. Thanks again for listening.